So hello and welcome to another Tips with Cliff Counter-Strike 2 video. This video is going to specifically be looking at the CT side of Mirage. In the last video we looked at T side and we talked about some executes you can throw, some basic grenades, things like that. And at the very end of that video I did showcase I think 3 grenades on CT side, but upon reflection I wasn't too happy with the showcase of those grenades because I don't think I explained it particularly well. It feels like a bit of a tendency for me when I watch back videos. I feel like I've missed a ton of things, but I'm not a natural video maker by any means, and I realize I have a tendency to ramble, but I'm going to try and improve as I go. But anyway, this video we're going to talk about CT side and some tips and tricks and things to bear in mind for each of the positions. We've already talked about in the first video the generic positions you play on every map, the anchor and rotator. But we'll go into a bit more detail this time and how to play those positions effectively and give yourself and your team the best chance to have a very strong CT side. So on A site, obviously we have the anchor. The anchor typically is going to play on the right side of the site and the rotator is going to play on the left side of the site. The first thing I will show you is for the rotator player, also known as the connector player. If you're the connector player and you're on a full buy and you have a Molotov, you always want to throw this Molotov here and make this jump at this step here. The reason for this is the T with a good spawn can get to this position faster than you get to this position. And the problem with that is if they're mechanically skilled, they can actually kill you before you cross, which would be very bad. You don't want to die before you've even got to a position. So using this utility on a full buy is very effective because it completely nullifies the sight line of the T and prevents them from getting a clean shot on you. Obviously you would be here when you threw it. The second benefit of this Molotov is it stops an early rush out ramp, or if they do go through the Molotov they're going to take a ton of damage. When you make the jump, the reason for the jump is to make yourself a hard target to hit. And as you jump you obviously get visibility, and if you see someone ramp you could throw a grenade like this. And if you saw someone ramp, you would know, okay, this round I need to focus on A. I need to help my A anchor player. If I didn't see anyone ramp, then I know I can play in connector and I can have my mid focus. And we'll talk about mid focus a little later. But this is a way to quite quickly work out as the connector player, should I be helping A site or should I be helping connector at the start of the round? But if you see someone, you can use these grenades to give yourself the best chance to get to this position safely, and then you can know to focus on A. Additionally, as a connector player, you can smoke Palace by aiming at this second wooden beam, just doing a step pro like this. You always want your grenades to be thrown from a position of safety. You wouldn't want to be smoking Palace from like this, for example, because obviously if the T had a timing, he could peek this angle and kill you. The advantage obviously here is that you are very safe. Palace can't kill you, ramp can't kill you. So you want to smoke from behind here. Typically the connector guy should be smoking Palace because the anchor player needs to be using his smoke on ramp. So if you're playing A anchor, these are the positions that you could be playing, or the default positions, or positions I advise you play. The first one is default, this position here, and you can play more passively if you prefer. Relying on sound, you can even hold Palace like this. You would hear the T's if they ran out. Or you could play more actively and swing for information and things like that. It's kind of up to you. A second strong position is you could play underwood like this. Again, you can hear if they come out ramp. Obviously you're kind of exposed from the Palace guy, but the Palace guy can be checked by connector. And it's very unlikely that the Palace guy checks like this before he's taken some time to check all these sight angles. Obviously it depends on your communication with your con guy if that's an effective spot or not. Another spot is Firebox. I kind of advise against playing Firebox for newer players because it can be quite difficult to isolate these two fights effectively. And the other two positions are safer, but it's a position to bear in mind. And you can also play CT. CT is the passive position. These sight angles are the more active positions. So the benefit of the passive position is you're much less likely to get insta-killed. You can stay alive, which is good. The disadvantage obviously is because you don't have an active player on a site, you can lose a site without even taking a fight, which means you're playing for retakes. And retakes can be difficult. It depends on your team if you have a good retake team or if you don't. And you can also always mix it up, but I recommend that if you feel like you're always getting isolated on the site and your connector player is not in a position to help you, then retreating to CT and playing more passively, you could even jump spot like this, is a good option. Another thing to bear in mind on site is you can jump up onto this box with the crouch jump, and you can smoke palace yourself. As I said, I think the connector player should be smoking palace for you, but if you're solo queue and you're playing A anchor, or your connector player is using their smoke on middle, then you can do it yourself. But the main smoke you want to be throwing as a beginner on A anchor is your ramp smoke. Now you can throw this early round if you wish to. That's fine. We talked about last video about holding smoke and the benefits of holding smoke and that kind of thing. But if you get the feeling, the tendency that the Ts are a very aggressive team and they quite often are just rushing out ramp, throwing this smoke early is very good. If they're not doing that, if instead they're taking early mid control, or you get information from your connector window or short player that they're out mid, maybe don't throw the smoke immediately. You could have a set timing. For example, you could say, okay, at 1 minute, I'm going to throw my ramp smoke if they're a slower team. Or as another option, if you're going up against a team which is effective enough to be using executes, so they're throwing a stairs smoke, a jungle smoke, and a CC smoke, you could hold your smoke till you see the smokes come over, and then as you see these smokes coming over, you could throw your smoke then. And then obviously the Ts have a very difficult decision to make, because they can either push through the smoke, which puts them at a massive disadvantage in any of these fights, or they can wait for the smoke to fade, and if they do that, then all their execute smokes are also going to fade and they're no longer going to be effective. Just as a tip, if you do throw a smoke, some of the times you can ignore it, but most of the times you want to hold the smoke, meaning you keep your crosshair on the smoke, because otherwise the opponent does not suffer the disadvantage of coming through the smoke. So for example, if we throw this smoke grenade and we were just staring like this, then even though the Ts are at a massive disadvantage running through the smoke because they can't see anything, if you're just looking up here, they're still going to kill you anyway. So holding the smoke and then having your connector go watch palace would be a much more effective play. So don't just think that a smoke wall is a wall. There are situations where it should be, I suppose, but just bear in mind that a lot of the time with smokes on current choke points, you need to be holding the smoke to benefit from the smoke being placed. You could also throw your grenade or your Molotov here as well. You could even have your connector guy, as I said, when he crosses, he uses Molotov. When that Molotov fades, you use your own Molotov. When your Molotov fades, then you use the smoke. If they're an early rush team, or hold your smoke dependent on what they do. Just as another point, because we just talked about executes and you can stop the execute with a well-timed smoke. And we did last video talk about how to prevent executes, but some other things to bear in mind. If you hold your smoke, you could also use the smoke on site, like this. You might think, what's the benefit of that? The benefit is that the Ts are specifically at low rank, but this works even against experienced players, is that injecting chaos into a round with like a smoke on a site can be very advantageous for the CT, because the T has to now worry about all the different positions that the smoke has created, on top of the fact that you could be sat in the smoke. A T is most likely not going to want to plant, because he's worried that you could just be sat in the smoke waiting for the plant, and this can slow a T side down quite a lot. It can make a lot of Ts worried about the smoke, so they're keeping their crosshair on the smoke while your connector guy can do something. So that's just something as a trick that you can, if nothing else is working, you can say, okay, I'm going to hold my smoke, and then when the smokes come over, I'm going to put the smoke on site, and then I'm going to play like a weird angle, and then hope that I can get a kill when they're worried about the smoke. A final thing about executes as well is that don't forget that you can pop the smokes in CS2 like this, and then you can get a kill and then move away, and remember that the opponent can do that too. It's one of the new features with CS2. Is that everything on A-Anchor site? I believe so. Another trick you can do as A-Anchor, or a good thing that you can do, is you can help your mid players. You can throw this from anywhere on site, but I like to do it firebox because it gives you security against the ramp and palace guy peeking. Is you ready a flash like this, and we're going to do a jump throw and also hit 1 as we throw like this. Hit W as we throw, excuse me. This is a very strong flash for mid, and if your teammates call it, it could be super useful for them to peek and get a kill. Or blind pretty much anyone in mid, so it's very, very, very strong. So you could have an agreement at the start of the rounds that if the connector guy doesn't see anyone, he throws his Molotov, he goes mid, and then the ramp guy flashes for you, and then you can get 3 kills with this flash. It's a very strong flash. Another flash you can throw as a CT player if you're playing Underwood is you can throw a flash like this, wait for the pop sound, and then you can peek, and it will blind anyone that's coming out ramp. If you're a T side, this is T side focus, but if there's a tip that I can give you that will help, I'm going to say it. So if you're a T side and you feel like Underwood is a really problematic area, meaning you keep coming out ramp and there's always someone Underwood throwing this flash or just killing you, the counter is you need a guy to come palace and molly this, right? So if you're the CT and you're playing Underwood and they're throwing this Molotov, then maybe this position is not so good and you need to play somewhere else. But that's the counter if there's a really annoying CT that's super effective here. This is a very powerful position, but at higher elos, it's really not used at all because it just always gets mollied because it's always countered. So that's a tip for you. So if we're the rotator player, we already talked about when we do this Molotov, we check on the cross, we throw a grenade if we see someone. If we see someone, we focus on A, we have a palace focus. But what do we do if it's not A? Well, we need to go mid and we need to take mid control. So the meta on Mirage on CT side and T side is to fight for mid control at the start of the round, at least at higher reloads. At low reloads, it can be a lot more difficult to predict. But that's what comes down to having the in-game awareness to read patterns and see if the T team's like a very heavy A attack team and they're just ignoring mid and going A every round, in which case you would want to be focusing on A. But if they're a more of a default T team, or if they're taking early mid control, you need to be helping your mid players take mid control and be taking an angle like this at the start of the round. The other thing to bear in mind is connector is after the start of the round and you take this fight, you can swap to the right side of connector and hold underground. Now, underground is a very tricky, sneaky position for the Ts, and it can be incredibly effective. And it's kind of the connector player's responsibility to shut this position down and to counter this position. Because if the connector guy, for example, is not doing their job and they're just taking the top mid fight for too long because they're trying to get kills, or they are staying on A and they're not communicating that underground is open, Ts can get out here. If they see a barrel of a gun, they can quite easily kill your mid player. They can, if there's 2 of them, they can crouch, jump, and boost into mids. They can jump onto bench and kill your short player. They can sneakily get into connector and ambush your players on A site. They can jump into window, and there's just a ton of damage a singular T can do if he can get out this position and it's not being held by the connector player. So if you're the connector player on A, I recommend you take the top mid fight for the first 10 seconds of the round, and then afterwards you worry about connector. And if you're no longer holding connector, you need to communicate to your teammates on middle, and they need to be aware that underground. If you're playing connector and you're no longer holding underground, you need to very clearly communicate that underground is open. Okay. So when playing in connector, I showed you this smoke last video, but I didn't particularly explain it very well. You can throw a smoke like this, and while this does let you take a mid fight with some obscurement, and also lower tier teams might even assume that this is their own smoke, so when they cross they might not check you properly. But the real benefit of this smoke is that you can walk out bottom mid and you can actually check underground. Sometimes you can get a kill here, and then when you get a kill you can, smoke will still be up obviously, after you get a kill you can run through the smoke and escape safely. And for the top mid guys, obviously if you're coming here, they won't see you. If you take this fight, they can still see you. But if you run out, they won't see you. They won't see you. They're going to be worried about top mid and short and connector. You can get your kill and then run back quite safely. So you can do that. That's a trick you can use. You can also flash off the left side of mid like this when you take your first fight if you want to. It's not going to blind anyone top mid, but it will blind people that are out like this. But it won't blind anyone out here. Or not particularly effectively anyway, but it is something that you can do. The better flash is to have your ramp guy flash for you. So that's how you can play connector. You can also push top mid with connector pushing if you're on like an MP9 or a force buy, but it's very important that if you're going to do that, that you're on the same page with your window and short guy and they know what to expect. because you would really benefit from, if you're going to do that, you would benefit from like having your window guy for a Molotov for window and then flashing for you. And also, this connector push is very much nullified at higher level by just having these flashes that I taught you on the T side. Like, these flashes will just destroy you if you rush top mid. But it can be effective if you're on like an MP9 or a 5.7, or if you're at lower elo and the Ts can't react to it in time. Okay, so that's connector. Another thing is to bear in mind that, again, if they use like a good smoke, don't forget the popping trick that you can pop the grenade, you can pop the smoke, get a kill, and then get out of here. Remember that this wood is spammable, so if you're here and you're playing this angle, a T can just kill you through the wood, which is not the best. And you can play on this box. That's pretty good as well. If you're a T and you're getting connected, this is a very good angle, by the way, if you're on T side. Okie dokie. I think that's A, more or less covered. I'm sure there's like a billion things, so I will be annoyed that I forgot after the video, but I think I did a pretty good job of explaining A site for a beginner at least. Anyway, so next thing is the window position, mid position. Max once asked me a pretty good question, which was, he said, does the AWP typically always play middle? And the answer to that is yes, typically. However, the AWP should have like some degree of freedom and flexibility, and the team should ensure that the AWP feels comfortable. The AWP obviously is a very powerful gun. It's a one shot per kill. Typically, the AWP should be getting the most amount of kills in the game. And they should be allowed to play where they feel comfortable and where they feel that they're going to be effective. It's kind of an AWP's responsibility to know that. I mean, you could have an IGL which places the AWP, but specifically if you're solo queuing or even in a team, I think, as the AWP, you should know where you're effective. And if you feel like you're being countered because you're playing window and you're just dying every round, you can say, okay, I want to play B-apps with the AWP this round, or I want to play on the CT with the AWP this round, and your team has to react and adapt and make room for you. And that's kind of the responsibility of being an AWPer, that and the fact that if you lose your gun, it's more damaging to the team economy because it's so expensive. But you can be very effective with an AWP and obviously shut certain areas of the map down entirely with an AWP. So to summarize, don't just play window every round as an AWP and feel like, okay, that's what I have to do. You can go anywhere that you feel effective on the map. Just make sure that you communicate with your team where you're going and what they need to do if you're changing position. So for example, if you're no longer playing window and you're going to go play B house with the AWP, someone else has to worry about middle, or your connector and short player have to be aware that window is open. So if you're the B site and short player, you always want to shoot this vent and break this vent for your AWPer. And the second thing is, and this applies to all maps, be very mindful of this, is, I mean, this applies to all guns, but AWPs especially. Bear in mind that timing is incredibly important in Counter-Strike, and if your movement, so let's say we spawn here and I'm going towards B, we want to be aware of our movement in spawn. We don't want to be, like, for example, taking too long to buy if we're AWP, or alternatively, if we're not the AWPer, we don't want to be blocking the AWP on his way to get into window. We want to make sure that the AWP has a clean path to get into window as effectively as possible, and we want to be moving out the way. At lower level, it's very common for people to not understand how important timing is and how it can completely dictate a fight. So, as I said, if you're the anchor or short player, make sure you shoot this vent for your AWP as they run past. As the AWP, you want to get through here cleanly, like that. You don't want to get stuck with bad movement. For example, you don't want to get up here and then be like, and then crouching like this. And you also don't want to get stuck so that when you're going through, you're moving like this, and you obviously don't want anyone in front of you getting you stuck. This is because if you have good movement, like the first time I showed you going through Murder Hole, you can get to this fight before the Ts get here, and you have the advantage. If you don't have good movement, the Ts could already be out, and you could be in a lot of trouble. So when you get to this angle, this is a very strong AWP angle to hold at the start of the round. It should be like a fairly consistent kill. But obviously an entire meta has evolved to countering the AWP playing window and countering mid control. So we need to know what to do when the opponents use utility to attempt to counter our position. So if they throw a start smoke like this, it's not too bad if you're an AWP, because you could instead come to the left side of the window, you could throw a Molotov like this, and then you could peek after the Molotov. And then obviously if anyone like got behind the boxes, they would have to come swing out because they didn't want to burn, and then they would be on the left side of the window. and then you could hold this angle and then get a kill. And then if you were like trying to escape, you could even throw a smoke yourself, or you could just throw a flash and then get to the right side safely. But that's something you can do. If they throw a smoke on window, and they're a little more advanced, there are two things you could do. The first is that you could pop the smoke like this, take a fight, and then leave. Or secondly, and the most important thing, is that if you're just like, there's a smoke here, don't just stand here with the AWP waiting for the smoke to fade, because it effectively makes you completely useless. You need to immediately adapt and take a different line. So you could take Palace line and say, okay, I'm holding Palace, and then the connector guy can more be worried about middle because the A site guy has you holding his Palace. Or you could go through Murder Hole, and you could go to Kitchen and help your B site player. Or you could even make the full rotate to CT if you know that the opponent is quite often going A site and then hold like ramp here and then have your site guy on the site. It depends what your positions are, but the important thing is just don't stand staring at a smoke, just waiting for the smoke. That's a really bad habit that you want to avoid. As soon as you see the smoke, if you're not popping it, go somewhere else. Obviously, another thing is don't pop this smoke every single round, because hopefully the T's are good enough to be like, oh, he's popping the smoke every round. Okay, I'll wait for the grenade to pop, and then as soon as he peeks, I'll kill him. That's something that you can bear in mind on T side as well. If the opponent is popping smokes with grenades, when you throw the smoke, wait like 1 or 2 seconds for him to pop, and then you can punish him, and then it's very unlikely that he'll do it again. That's just like spotting a tendency and then exploiting the tendency. Another thing about window is not to hold this position for too long, because the barrel of your gun is sticking out from window, even though the first person model doesn't seemingly make it that obvious. So this guy will see your AWP barrel sticking out like this, and he'll know your window, and he can throw a grenade, or he can even kill you, or he can boost someone up and kill you. The only reason you can do this, for example, is if your connector guy is holding underground properly, then you don't have to worry as much. But I would only hold this position for like the first 15 seconds of a round, or maybe even less than that, 10 seconds even. And if I don't see anyone, I would be moving to a different line and trying to help somewhere else and make the AWP as effective as possible. Okay, remember you can also throw this flash if you want to take a peek for information. And on top of that, you could also, a little more advanced, but you could also jiggle for information late round. So you could just say, okay, I'm just going to check top mid, and if I don't see anyone, I'm going to move. And I'm going to check top mid, and if I see someone, I'm not going to retake that fight, I'm just going to come, okay, there's one guy out mid, and then move somewhere else. So that, yeah, that's some tips on how to play window and middle and AWPing. Moving over to the B side of the map, so we have our B anchor player who's going to play on this site area, and our B rotator player. So as a B rotator, the short player, first thing to bear in mind is you have very good audio cues. If there's a B rush, you'll hear stepping towards B rush, and you can also hear underground if there's a rush towards underground. Obviously, this does not work if they play contact. Contact means if you're going B as a T, you would walk the entire way to deny information, and the term contact means you only start running when you take contact. So when you see the T, that's when you start going, because at that point they know where you are already. But if you hear a rush, which obviously is very frequent at lower elo, you need to immediately be worried about helping your B guy. You shouldn't be going up short and taking mid fights if you hear a B rush. B rush, immediately in your head you say, okay, I need to help my B guy. And if you have a Molotov or a grenade, you could use it. Or you could just get into a position like where you have a crossfire with your B site player. For example, you could play this corner, and your site player could play this corner, or whatever you have set up, wherever you like to play. And because you're comming your it's a B rush, you need to have either the window player or the connector guy making sure that they're checking mid. So if someone says it's B, we don't immediately want the middle and the connector player just to immediately just like, right, I'm going to get my knife out and run to B, because obviously if there is a late player coming out mid, or even not that late, and he gets out here for free, he can run up short and backstab our short player. So you want either the connector or the window player to they need to rotate, but they don't want to rotate immediately. Okay, unless obviously the BAPS or short Kai knows for a fact that it's 5B. We'll talk about comms in a little bit. So make use of your audio if you're a short player. If you hear a lot of steps BAPS, make sure you focus on B. Comm to your mid players that you need them to hold short so you don't get backstabbed. As for playing short, you can throw this flash, which flashes top mids. like this. But I was told recently in a game that I played that people are now using, I think, this flash. I think it's a bit better. I haven't actually checked myself. Yeah, I think this flash is probably a bit better because it blinds, excuse me, closer into mid. Yeah, so maybe use this one. I think this is what people are using now. It's off this corner of this building. And it lands a bit higher and it blinds more. But this flash is still okay, but this one's probably better. You can also throw this flash here off this wall and peek with it. Like this. And this will obviously blind anyone top mid. And even if they see the flash coming, so like, oh, there's a flash, they have to turn to not get blind, at which point you have the advantage in the fight. So for how to react to smokes when you're the short player, if they smoke deep, like the smoke I told you to do, the reason that I really like the smoke, and I recommend you use it in your own games, we talked about it on T side, just a quick refresh, you come to this corner, you aim at this door, do a jump throw. The reason I really like this smoke is because it lets the Ts take ladder room control. And this lets them get into ladder room and they can do a lot of damage by killing the window guy or by leaving a player in here late rounds. But if they throw one of the other smokes that you see quite a lot, like this, this lets you as the CT get into ladder, and that's an option. Now whether you take that option depends on, again, tendency. If the Ts are very rarely going into B apps and very rarely have an apps presence and you feel like your B anchor is reliable, then you could maybe get into ladder and play like a short angle like this, or alternatively you could even take this angle and check the underground, and then you could come through and check the connector position. So I'll give you an example of like a cycle of rotation that you might see at a little higher level, and that will hopefully explain how you can rotate more effectively, and it will involve a window player and a short player. So for example, if we play the window position and the opponents are smoking a window at the start of the round, what we could do is we could pop the smoke like this, take a fight, leave, go towards B house or go towards B site and take this angle, thus reinforcing our B player. Meanwhile, our short guy that has been commed that there is a smoke window knows that there's no longer any window support, and if the T's throwed a short smoke, obviously it wouldn't be as deep, but even if it's this deep, you would still be able to get into ladder. They would climb up to the top of ladder, and they could, when this window smoke, it would obviously probably have like 4 seconds left in its lifetime. They could play like this position, and then when the smoke phase, they could get to this corner and hold connector. So hopefully that makes sense. What you've seen is that these two players have rotated positions. The window player is now helping B, and the B rotator that was helping B is now playing window. And in so doing, having that rotation has nullified the effectiveness of the T's utility. Even if they used effective team utility like a short and window smoke to gain access to connector, or to execute on B, we still have a solid B defense, we still have a window player, we've just navigated around the utility and nullified its effectiveness. It's just a singular example of how rotation can be a technique in which you can massively improve your chances of winning rounds. As for playing short, when you should play aggressive short and like be pushing short and taking angles like these, like that, it depends whether you have a window and connector player peeking mid. It's very ill-advisable to be taking this mid fight, like this short aggressive fight, if you have no one connector and no one window, and you're just solo pushing like, oh, I want some kills. It's not a good idea. You can take these fights and be helping top mid at the start of the round if you have your connector guy who is also looking top mid, and you have your window guy who's also looking top mid. That way you maximize the advantage of taking mid control. But you don't want to be doing this solo. And obviously if they throw smokes or your B guy's in trouble, you need to be going back towards B side. Because the thing to bear in mind about getting into ladder is obviously if you don't call for rotation, if you don't communicate that your B site guy is alone, he could very easily get executed upon and he's a single guy on a site. So that's something to bear in mind if you're the short player. Another final trick is that if they do throw the good smoke, or the deep smoke, you could crouch here and then someone could jump on your head and then get on top of this box and take a fight like this. With an AWP, this is almost a guaranteed kill, and if you have a rifle, you have a very favorable fight, and then you can just back off after you get the first kill. Okay, so finally, the B anchor position on B. How to play B anchor. First thing I recommend you do fairly frequently on rounds is jump spot. So jump spot is a technique in which we use the A and D keys and the jump key to jump in a manner which means that our head is only visible for a very small amount of time. And you can see me doing it here. This allows us to take information with very low risk. Now remember that information on Counter-Strike 2 is a very valuable currency. It's not purely kills that are valuable, and there's no statistic for whether you're a player that's consistently gaining you information which is winning you rounds. And information can literally win you rounds. And getting information in a play which gives you very little risk is obviously a very strong thing to do. You can also do this with a grenade cocked, so that if you see an opponent, you can immediately throw your grenade and then play a more safe angle, like a molly, and the molly will obviously prevent the opponent from pushing. Or if they do push through, they're going to take a ton of damage without you even having to take a fight. You can also smoke early round if you wish to. If you're a little less experienced and you just want something that feels a lot more comfortable, you could smoke fairly deep. The thing with smoking BAPs, my tip for smoking BAPs, is make sure that the smoke doesn't land like here and is super shallow, because a T can get into the smoke and just like sort of sneak through, which can just catch you off guard. And also they could get very close to the smoke and just run through very suddenly, and that can also catch you off guard. You want a deep smoke which gives you time to react, and additionally you don't want a smoke which like covers these angles. You want a smoke which just makes it, you want to give a smoke that could possibly give an advantage to the T's. So a deep smoke is good. And if you're holding your smoke, so you're not throwing your smoke immediately because you're jump spotting, that's obviously very good, because if you don't see anyone, then you can keep your smoke for an A retake. But also another thing you could do is you could drop the smoke on site, like I told you with the A side. And again, this means you can play a bunch of different angles, and the opponent has to worry about all these different angles and is not going to feel comfortable. And obviously, if there was no smoke here, they could take this fight and then worry about the rotation. Whereas if this smoke is, and you're playing like right behind the smoke, their back is going to be exposed to whoever's playing here and rotating into sight. So that's an effective way you can use your smoke grenade. But the main thing as a beginner on a B anchor is to make use of the technique of jump spotting and hold your nades and only react based on information. The other thing I will say, and this applies to all maps, is to only say what you see. That's like the golden rule of communication. Lower levels and lower elo, it's very common for people to overcom to speak the same communication line many times because they panic. An example would be, it's B, it's B, it's B, it's B, and obviously that's not useful to your team, it's not useful to yourself, and you're just creating stress on people that obviously might already be feeling a lot of pressure. And also, upon hearing that, your mid player might think, oh, okay, it's a 5-man B rush, and then they leave, and then the person lurks out mid, and then they can backstab. You only want to say what you see. So if you jump spot and you see like 2 people, you just say 2B and play your spot. If you see bomb, you could say bomb B, play your spot, etc. Don't panic, don't overcom. You shouldn't ever really say things like, it's B rush, because I mean, lower elo especially, that to most people is just going to mean that they're all B, when indeed there could be a lurk. There could be 3 people playing B and the bomb is, and one other guy is lurking late palace. There could be 4 B with the bomb, but there's a guy coming late out middle. Just try to keep your communications clear, not super stressful, and remember the golden rule, only say what you see. And have trust that your teammates are going to rotate if you need help. And if they don't rotate when you need help, and you say 3B and you play a passive position and you feel like you're isolated because your short guy is peeking up out short and not helping you, then that is a conversation you can have after the game and say, hey, I feel like you're not playing short, you're not helping me properly. But in the game, we don't want to just be panic calling. We don't want to be saying like, it's B, it's B, it's B, and just causing stress and not having good rotations. So on site, some more passive positions you can play. Bench is pretty good. I like playing on top of bench. It's like an off angle and not many people expect it. even at a high reload. You can also play like this angle and watch people cross. This is a pretty good spot because it's quite a safe way of gaining information. And you can also play like backside and things like this. With spot selection, in terms of position selection, I should say, when on a site, always bear in mind where your teammate is playing. So for example, if you're playing on A site and you're like, I'm going to play this angle might be very strong, right? You might get a bunch of kills here. But if you've got a short guy that's playing like here, you're just giving the terrorists 2 1v1 fights. Because they're jumping out abs, they can kill your short guy, and you can't do anything from this position to help your teammate. You're just stuck here. You have to hope that they make a mistake and don't clear you. So when you're thinking about, okay, what position should I play? If there's no one near you, then pick whatever position you like, you feel comfortable in. But if there's someone with you, and they should be, then play a position where you have a crossfire, or you feel comfortable knowing that your teammate is going to play in a way that can help you. So for example, another example of this would be car. You could say a position like car is good, and it can be very good, like with an MP9 or a 5.7 or stuff. But let's say you're playing here and a short guy is taking mid control, and then you're saying, okay, it's B-rush, and your short guy like can't play this position because there's a smoke here. You're very isolated in car. Like the T's can throw a Molotov, and then you're in big trouble, and they can isolate you and kill you, and your short guy can't do anything because there's a smoke here, right? So you always want to be aware of, when you're picking positions, that you're playing in a position which is beneficial for your teammate and that you can help your teammate. And yeah, that's something to bear in mind. Okay, I think that's pretty much all positions. Final thing I'll just show you, I think I showed you on last video, but remember you can throw this flash, throw it fairly high as a connector player, and it will blind all your enemies coming at ramp, and then your site player can call for the flash, hear the pop, and peek. It's just something that I just remembered that I forgot to talk about on A-Anchor. So hopefully that was useful. I've covered all positions on Mirage on CT side. Should give you a pretty good indicator of how to play all these different spots, and you should have a very solid CT side.